I do think that Barack Obama demonstrated terrific leadership qualities in the campaign. It's a big part of the reason that he was elected. I think he seemed substantive and knowledgeable. People had concerns about his experience level, which I think he answered in some ways through not only his grasp of policy, which I think became stronger even as the campaign went on. But I think it was his calmness in the face of changing circumstances and crises. And at no point in the campaign was that more apparent than the mid-September economic meltdown, where the entire global financial system almost collapsed. And I think we had two very different pictures of leaders responding to that. I think Obama seemed steady, and John McCain less so. And I think that hurt John McCain tremendously. And you know, we could argue who might have had better economic policies, but from a political perspective, the Obama team handled that crisis much better than the McCain team. And Obama seemed like a thoughtful, purposeful leader in extremely challenging times, and nothing did more to, I think, cement the outcome of that campaign than their handling of that crisis late in the campaign over the course of a week or 10 days. So I think what people saw in Obama was a steadiness, intelligence, purposefulness, and a willingness to talk, to use language that we hadn't heard in the previous administration, and he presented a more collaborative approach and really brought the country to feel like yes, we can. Let's do it together. Now, as Mayor Cuomo famously said, politics is prose. I mean, politics is poetry. Governing is prose. Governing is much more difficult than running a campaign. You're responsible for outcomes. You're dealing with so many more stakeholders every single day. There's just so much more pressure on you, and it's much harder to control. And so the Obama team, starting with the president, have had to adjust to that. I think that I would give him strong marks for leadership over the course of the year, with some areas that need improvement. I think he's continued to focus on the long term. I think he's continued to show great command of the substance in front of him. I think he's continued to show willingness to adjust course when circumstances change, but to stay the course when only the politics is changing. And it's hard to know the difference. You know, there's tremendous pressure in Washington to respond immediately to everything that happens. And we've certainly seen that, as I discussed last night, in the last 13 days in the wake of the Christmas Day attempted bombing. People want somebody fired, policies change, something done immediately, and the president's response has been to the first few days were unsteady. The president's response has been to, let's get the facts, let's evaluate this, let's try to solve the problem rather than respond to the news cycle. That's something I've admired. If there's a weakness in his leadership style, it's that I think he sometimes comes off as being a little bit aloof, and as in spite of the fact that his language is collaborative, the optics of his presidency have often been Barack Obama standing alone. And I think that he's not, you know, leaders have a very different personality. He has a very different personality than, say, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a person who was constantly surrounded by people who needed to be almost in physical contact with America at all times. There were downsides to that, but I think there was an engaged quality to him that sometimes Obama lacks. I think sometimes Obama seems like he's standing apart. And I think they have to be careful about that, you know, what sustained Bill Clinton in the tough times was the sense that he was one of the people. And whenever you ask the question, does Bill Clinton care about people like you, the answer was always really high percentage of Americans who said, yeah, he understands my problem and he cares about people like me. Obama has to be careful about that quality. Do people think he understands their problems and is like them? And that's not a question of race, although that might play into it. It's a question of personal touch. And those kinds of signals are important in leadership. They seem on some level, and sometimes I think Obama views them as being superficial, and in some ways they are, but we all know that symbolism is a huge part of leadership. It's not just what you do, but it's the signals that you send and the culture that you try to create. And I've always worried that because Obama is, you know, sort of doesn't need to be loved, that sometimes he doesn't work hard enough to be loved. I know that's a kind of a double-edged sword, but it's something that I do worry about a little bit with him. I think over the long term, you know, luck plays a little bit of a role in these things. If the economy recovers, I assume he'll pass health care, you know, then I think that his discipline and his focus on the long term will pay dividends. But you never know what's going to happen. I think one of the things that the president has learned in the first year, as all presidents do, is that you have so little control over how events unfold. The world is so, every day something happens that you plan on, whether it's Christmas Day attempted bombing or winning the Nobel Prize. You know, you have no, even your friends surprise you and create things that are sometimes difficult to manage. So, you know, we'll see. But I do think he's had a better first year than he's getting credit for right now. His popularity is down for two reasons. One, because the unemployment is at 10%. 10%. You know, presidents don't do very well when there's 10% unemployment. And the second reason is he's tried to do big things. And he's had to do big things, partly because of the economy and partly because the political system is such that presidents have very short windows. You have the first year of your presidency is the time where your political capital is the strongest, especially if you've been elected by a solid margin as Obama was. And he believed, and I think rightly, that if he didn't get some big things done in the first year, he would not get them done. So he spent a lot of that political capital, and we'll see if the investment in health care in particular and in the stimulus will pay off.